This is HBR News number 497. Astroturfed riots. Matt Taibbi hits back against #MeToo, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you're not consumed by it. I am your host, Brian, and I'm joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts, Hannah and Mike. Or Dr. Random Cam. Whichever one prefer Random Cam, if that's the one you know. That seems to be what everybody knows him by. But anyway, we have a great show lined up for you guys this week, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News, we're going to be discussing the lawfare that is being used against Elon Musk for protecting some semblance of free speech. Congresswoman and Harvard professor are caught planning massive riots and more, so stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So I've been doing this lately. We've been looking at this video about the popular Amazon show called Invincible, and there are lots of thought pieces and essays coming out. And this one is talking about the clever and genius ways that Invincible deconstructs masculinity, which is basically another way of saying how it upends and subverts our reality. I think that talking about the culture is extremely important, so I do it whenever I can, because I know that that is part of what we are fighting against, are essentially assumptions, stereotypes, and perversions of masculinity. That's kind of like how all of the policy gets installed. That's how all of the ways that we treat our men and boys, the way that we see their pain, is all through this lens, which is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. So we're going to continue to look at this video, and we might look at some other things. So please consider joining us by going to feedthebadger.com/subscribe so you can become a badger yourself and watch the additional content and participate in these very important discussions. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we have been completely borrowed from the internet, at least as the mainstream internet as we know it, then go find our archived content at badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. That's where our content lives. So I got through that shockingly quickly. I wanted to, before we get into the stories, I wanted to share a tweet or an X post, I guess is what we're calling it now, an X post by Karen. And I think that it's important because I didn't make this a story, but I just want you guys to see just how, I don't want to say ahead of the curve because it sounds like a boast, but like the way that we talk about things and the way that we try to look at things when we look at the news, which is why the news show exists, is to attempt to get people to see the blind spots in most people's discussions around this stuff. And Karen highlighted something. So you guys might know, if you're paying attention to American politics with regards to the things that Trump is doing, and also with regards to the border and our immigration system, that Trump was trying to use something called the Alien Enemies Act in order to deport, MS-13 gangs, like satanic drug dealers, stuff like that. And he wanted to use this Alien Enemies Act to do that, but he was confronted by activist judges, so he made an appeal, went to the Supreme Court, and managed to essentially win, but only by one vote. So I want to look at Karen's vote, because when people talk about this, and I've seen this everywhere, when people talk about this decision, they think that it's a partisan decision along the lines of Democrats and Republicans. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but that's not what it is. And so let's look at Karen's post here. This is what she said. In a 5-4 decision, SCOTUS authorized Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport gangbangers. All 4 dissenters were women. Odd. It's almost like women don't understand the consequences of their pathological compassion because they can't be drafted or forcibly deputized. Very few people have this take. Almost everybody sees this as purely a political thing. But the truth of it is that Karen is right here. And I just wanted to share this. I don't know if you guys, Hannah or Mike, if you guys saw this.
I didn't see it, but I would have retweeted it because it's something I say all the time.
Yeah.
But
Because remember,
this
like
is
one of the Supreme Court justices is a woman who is Republican or supposedly Republican or conservative, whatever. But she voted on the side of the other women. The
this,
only people who dissented were the women.
this is something that we talked about. We've talked about it clear back to the Blog Talk days, like in 2013, 2014, when we first started um, having Honey Badger Radio. And we've talked about the fact that women in government make these decisions, women vote for these decisions, and women, push other people to vote for these decisions. Women in journalism promote these decisions, and it's all the same thing. Leave these guys alone. Let these guys live their lives. They're just as important as other citizens, and they're some of the worst, messed up people in the world. And women will, they don't want to look like they're prejudiced, so they will ignore behavior that they wouldn't tolerate from somebody of their own ethnic background. They wouldn't tolerate it from another woman, but they'll tolerate it from a man who came from another country, or is another skin color, or is an alternative religion, stuff like that, because you just don't want to look bad. Women will do that for the sake of appearances, and then they get upset if men don't protect them from the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is
Well,
like,
yeah, they make
we've been
decisions that
we've
impact
been
the
on this
perimeter
for
without actually putting anything at risk on the perimeter except the
right,
men that are there.
and they don't even want to be the ones paying the taxes for the social services that are needed. When well, we got to help these people, what they really mean is you have to help these people, you men have to help these people, while we sit back and talk about how sad their situation is. And it just, we, like I said, we've been talking about this, gosh, for 12 years now.
Like it could be a coincidence. I mean, Jackson and Sotomayor and the other one were bound to do this because they're all dyed-in-the-wool communists. In fact, a couple of them were put there because they're women and dyed-in-the-wool communists. Jackson,
Yeah.
in Biden's case, explicitly. Sotomayor, in Obama's case, less explicitly, but it's still kind of obvious. ACB could have gone either way. She's not supposed to be there to do whatever Trump wants. She's kind of, supposed to be able to go either way. Like Trump once upon a time sort of noticed, the right-wing judges could go either way, but the left-wing judges always go the same way. I guess it's just surprising that the male left-wing judges happened to go the same way as well. It's unlikely to be a coincidence, but it could be. Just putting it out there. These things do happen.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. But I mean, I think that, well, again, you're right. I mean, we always leave room for that. Not a problem. But I'm inclined to think that there's something about the way that women perceive the world that's different, and I think that's why they're more likely to like have that take, right? And I think that men are more likely to look at things in terms of like, what is the right thing to do, what are the consequences for not doing it, and to hell with the compassion and the empathy and all of that, especially because we are again talking about like violent gangs. We're not talking about people who just cross the border illegally who also should go back, but he's actually prioritizing the people who are, criminals on top of doing the criminal act of crossing the border. So I think that you have to say no. It's like, well,
there's a really solid difference between the way men and women think about this kind of stuff, that I don't think it's ever in the forefront of people's minds. We'll put it that way, right? When men think of responsibility, they think of it first as an individual thing, that I individually am responsible for this or that, and other people are responsible for their actions and their choices, and any collective responsibility, like there's a disaster and it's time to rescue people from homes that are flooded or on fire or damaged by a storm or something. They'll take collective responsibility for that. but they'll take it in an individual way. Each person has their task, and they don't worry about what the other guy is doing. They worry about what they need to get done. And if something isn't done, they do it, and they don't complain about what isn't getting done unless it interferes with the mission. We can't get this done because, the government is keeping us from using these vehicles, or this group of guys didn't get their shit done, so now we're delayed. But it's never, I'm doing more than Bob is doing, and I feel resentful about it in those types of situations.
Yeah.
Feminists sort of have exacerbated this, but I think it was always there, where when you talk about responsibility for women, it's never I, it's we. Right?
Yes.
Women take the I out of out of everything, and everything has a we in it, even if it doesn't, right? And so it's we're responsible, and a lot of times women are more focused on whether you're doing your part than whether they're getting theirs done. And what ends up happening is, if you have to rely on women in a disaster, or if you have a collective decision that's getting made about a disaster response, or a response to any other circumstance, all of a sudden, women are wanting to assign responsibility to other people. They're wanting to take their side, or their people, their group, their community, their population, their family, their whatever, to take collective responsibility for another group of people, and so on. And it's just, the difference creates an inability for women to consider the impact of their decisions on the men that are going to have to carry out what they're advocating for. And it's not just in terms of illegal immigration and the fact that gang members are getting across, and that men are having to protect their homes and families from people who, back in their home country, like, their MO for handling conflict was to behead someone. That's not the only thing, right? It's sending their sons to war, right? It's
Yeah.
increasing the taxes that their husband has to pay, because they have this weird notion that we should be promoting abortion in Zimbabwe. That all of this is the same thing manifesting in different ways. And part of it is because, men are accountable, women are not. So men take individual responsibility, and they will take responsibility for all of the consequences of their actions. Women don't take individual responsibility, and they, will put collective responsibility on the consequences of their actions, and then any consequences that they can call unintended, or that they're embarrassed by, or anything like that, well, that's not our fault. That's the fault of how they reacted to what we did. But if you hadn't done that, that's not how the reaction would have been. And maybe they don't want America promoting abortion in Zimbabwe. Like, did you think about that?
Hmm.
Maybe your son doesn't want to go to war, right? Maybe your neighbors don't want to have 4 guns in the house, so that, they can protect against somebody that might want to come in and take all their stuff and behead their whole family. But yeah, it's always going to be that way, as long as our society allows women to get away with that lack of accountability.
Yep. All right. Well, let's go into the stories, because that was just like a little hors d'oeuvre, little appetizer, little bit of that Olive Garden breadstick action.
Also, if you
Mhm.
read Karen's tweets, go into her profile and read her pronouns.
Yeah, I saw that. All right, so let's get into the stories, because I don't want this to go super long. So let's start by talking about what has happened with this recent discovery regarding the resistance. All right, so in a recent expose by PJ Media, Victoria Taft reports that Representative Pramila Jayapal, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, a former chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and Harvard professor Erica Chenoweth are allegedly orchestrating large-scale anti-Trump riots. The article, dated April 3rd, 2025, claims the duo is conducting resistance training sessions to prepare leftists for street protests aimed at destabilizing Donald Trump's presidency with the ultimate goal of forcing his resignation. This echoes tactics purportedly used in 2017, which tapped links to the unrest during the, quote, Summer of Love that was in 2020. The piece suggests that their actions are part of a broader strategy targeting not just Trump, but also figures like Elon Musk, with calls for increased attacks on Tesla, highlighting a coordinated effort from influential figures in Congress and academia. The article frames these revelations as evidence of a deep-seated resistance movement, in quotes, because it's like literally astroturfed from the top down, within elite circles, accusing Jayapal and Chenoweth of leveraging their positions to incite chaos. Taft notes that their plans have drawn scrutiny, with some on X labeling them as potentially insurrectionary, though the evidence presented relies heavily on unnamed sources and speculative connections to past events. The piece also ties their activism to broader leftist discontent following Trump's re-election in November 2024, suggesting a repeat of historical protest cycles, which, yes, we are totally going to get. While the article lacks concrete documentation of the training session's content or scale, so we don't know exactly what this involves, it positions this as a critical moment, exposing the lengths to which Trump's opponents, and basically the opponents of half of the country or more, will go, urging readers to see it all as a call to action against such schemes. So, yeah, Hannah, you actually found this story.
I do have something I was going to say.
Yeah.
I want people to understand something about this. All right, it's not just astroturfed. Something that we have learned in the last year about Soros money, and a lot of it was stuff that was kind of there as knowledge already, but I think people just weren't paying attention to it. Everybody's like, "Oh yeah, George Soros, he's independently wealthy, and he funds this stuff, right, out of his independent wealth." Well, that's not correct, right? He's not independently wealthy. At one point, he was, but then along came USAID.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a whole bunch of organizations that are funded in various ways to various degrees by United States federal government programs. And these are all, under the humanitarian initiative veil, right? That we have.
Can I just jump in real quick? I want to jump in on something because somebody in our chat is saying riots or protests are not the same, as though we're stupid enough not to know that there is a difference.
Well, let me
read from the article. It says here, during a 1.5 hour resistance lab training, the Seattle Marxist Jayapal and Chenoweth paid lip service to nonviolence. While they paid lip service to nonviolence, activists on call were told to decide what their risk tolerance is for these actions, which is another way of saying, are you willing to get violent, go to jail, or hurt someone else? They said the attacks on Tesla were effective at moving people to the streets. They did not disavow any of the attacks on Teslas or the people driving them. And look, we've already experienced the riots, so we know that they happen.
This is not somebody who is making a genuine comment, all right? And we aren't falling for it anymore, okay? It's been since 2016 that we've been hearing from news media and leftists. There were peaceful protests, mostly peaceful protests, fiery but mostly peaceful protests, and the bar just keeps moving to a little bit more and more into the violent end of it, where you're burning down buildings, you're attacking people. In Washington State, the mostly peaceful protesters were dragging people's pets out of their homes and killing them. All right. What's the
Mhm.
next step? If you're going into people's residence and dragging their pets out and killing them, what's the next step for that? Right? What's the next bar movement that you're going to accept? If they're burning down whole communities and getting called mostly peaceful, what's the next bar that you're going to accept for that? And say, it's not a riot, it's a protest. Like, don't even bother trying. You're useless as a promoter of your side if you're doing that shit. It is not working. Try a new tactic.
Yeah.
Right? We're all done. We're all fed up with it. We're not dealing with that anymore. Your narrative is useless. And as a promoter of your narrative, you are useless. If you're getting paid to promote the narrative, if you're a paid troll, they're wasting their money on you. Right? If you're not a paid troll, you're a moron for even continuing to try this tactic. But
Yeah.
yeah, the thing I wanted to point out is the people that are reporting on this, right, they're talking about it as mostly peaceful protests and a grassroots movement and resistance and all that, want the few people that they are still fooling to actually believe this is organic, grassroots, individuals getting together because they're in opposition to what's going on in government, and it's normal people thinking normal ways, and this is just people's opinions, and it's the tide turning back to what they consider to be right, and so on. When in the reality, this is actually a government-funded, government-orchestrated resistance to an infiltrator of the government, who is in there knocking back corruption. Right? This is an immune response to what the and what the corrupt side of the government, which is the biggest side, views as a virus.
Yeah.
Right? They're allergic to accountability, and they are attacking. And this is part of the attack. None of this is organic. Most of these protesters are paid. The funding to get them there came from USAID, from the US AIDS infection. Right? None of this is real. All of it is engineered. All of it is acting. All of it is fake. And the minute that people start recognizing that and start demanding that their local officials do actually something about it, start demanding arrests, start demanding prosecution, and conviction and imprisonment when people burn down buildings and steal from stores and drag people's pets out of their homes and kill them in front of the people that love their pets, right? Then this will stop because people won't take those jobs. But until that happens, every community in the country is in danger because this stuff is getting funded, and it's getting funded by your tax dollars. So if you live in a city that has been set on fire by left-wing protesters, right? If you live in a city that has had all the stores in your downtown area broken into and stuff stolen, if you've had your homeowner's insurance go up because of these things, just be aware you paid them to come and tear down your city because your government took your money and gave it to Mr. Soros to fund these terrorists.
All right.
Yeah, the this so-called resistance is being heralded by its architects as resistance against quote-unquote authoritarianism, which is horribly ironic in all sorts of ways, not least the ones Hannah has already outlined. But furthermore, 5 years ago, the subject of authoritarianism was quite the hot topic because in 2020, it went too far. Way too far. I'm talking about the coup stuff. No one in their right mind could disagree that it went too far. Unfortunately, a great deal of people were not in their right mind at the time. To this day, they still believe the authoritarianism of 2020 didn't go far enough. The impossible, nonsensical demands put on the people were not the problem. It was all the people's fault for not sufficiently complying with the impossible, nonsensical demands. Except they didn't call it authoritarianism. It was, no, we had to do it. We had to muzzle everyone. We had to confine people to their homes. We had to close their small businesses, and we had to hold their livelihoods hostage over an injection. No, you did not. You chose this. I'm sure you thought you were saving lives because you were lied to on a quite titanic scale. But even if you were indeed saving lives, you chose the path that you thought would save lives, and that path was authoritarian. The least you can do is admit it. Which brings us to the present day, where the same people who were perfectly complicit in the forced redundancy and the unlawful house arrest and the chemical warfare against entire nations are turning around and calling the Trump administration authoritarian for, checks notes, preventing theft. And yes, that can indeed be called authoritarian. I'm willing to admit that. And I would be willing to choose that. Much like in El Salvador, President Bukele chose to do something about the...
Wait. What did President Bukele use to put all of those MS-13 satanic gang guys in prison? How did he do that? What did he use?
It was some kind of authoritarian decision. And it was the right thing to do. Now, that seems like an example so extreme that it's uncontroversially obvious. But let's not forget, the people attending these rallies, for the large part, cannot even agree with that. They don't give a shit that violent criminals are roaming the streets as long as it's not affecting them personally. And even when it does, they'll still find a way to blame old white men for everything and to punish white native males of all ages for anything committed by anyone else. That's their idea of liberty. Pardon. So it's hardly surprising that they don't want any organized crime syndicate to be held accountable for robbing an entire nation at gunpoint, including their own government. They want to live under this tyranny. They're desperate for it. It's the most widespread case of Stockholm syndrome ever observed. If the government wasn't stealing our money, what would we do? If foreign governments weren't stealing our jobs, what would we do? We'd be flapping in the wind. We'd be a capsized vessel bobbing upside down in the open ocean. Why? There would be no one to protect us from potentially having all our shit stolen if it wasn't for these international mobsters stealing all our shit. Irony of ironies, they finally have a presidential administration that is actually definitively doing everything it can, or at least something it can, to curtail the mass-scale theft of the American people's resources by governments domestic and foreign. And they can't handle it. That's what they call authoritarian. And to repeat, yes, it is. The gangster trying to rob you is authoritarian. The police officer trying to prevent the robber from robbing you is also authoritarian. I, for one, am in favor of the latter. I only wish the police force in my own country would actually do that rather than imprisoning people for telling jokes. And it is baffling to me that so many people are only in favor of the former, of the fucking gangsters. They would rather be robbed, blind, and buggered and left for dead by someone with a D next to their name than be so much as convenienced by someone with an R next to their name. I don't understand. Sometimes I feel like I understand, but then more stupid shit happens and I realize I never understood. But hey, it's still better than Europe. At least you have an option other than communists ransacking your country forever. At least you could theoretically throw a stone in a 5-mile radius and reach anyone who isn't a captured, brainwashed bobblehead who just nods along with the communist apocalypse. This is your weekly reminder to be thankful for what you have, America, and to nevertheless stay vigilant. Vigilance is what got you here. So yeah, God bless you. God bless us, everyone.
All right. Well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. It is always nice to know where all these peaceful, fiery, but mostly peaceful protests are coming from. All right. So we're going to move on to the next one. This is actually a pretty good story. So the gentleman here pictured is Matt Taibbi. If you guys don't know, Matt Taibbi is a prominent journalist known for his work on the Twitter files. And he recently filed a $10 million libel lawsuit against Democratic California Representative Sydney Kamlager-Dove on April 3rd, 2025, following her accusation that he is a, quote, serial sexual harasser, end quote. The claim surfaced during a House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee hearing on April 1st, where maybe they should have called April Fools, where Kamlager-Dove criticized Republicans for elevating Taibbi as a witness, alleging it distracted from the Trump administration's failings. She later amplified these remarks on social media, prompting Taibbi's legal action. The lawsuit asserts that her statements are, quote, demonstrably false and were made with actual malice, end quote, relying on discredited, decades-old satirical content she should have known was unreliable given her public position. Taibbi's suit hinges on Kamlager-Dove's decision to republish her accusations outside the protections of the Speech and Debate Clause, which shields congressional statements made during legislative duties. In a Substack post, he noted, this is Taibbi, that while he couldn't challenge her hearing remarks directly, her social media posts on X and her congressional website opened the door to legal recourse, leading to the filing in a New Jersey federal court. The article highlights the tension between congressional privilege and public accountability, with Taibbi arguing her actions were intended to harm his reputation rather than engage in good faith debate. Of course, because when all else fails, accuse the guy of being a sexist, which is basically what this is. Neither Taibbi's legal team nor Kamlager-Dove responded to immediate requests for comment, leaving the case's next steps uncertain as of the publication of this article. So,
allow me to construct a syllogism of sort. If messages of a sexual nature count as sexual harassment, and false accusations of harassment count as harassment, then false accusations of sexual harassment count as sexual harassment. So if this woman is found liable for such communications, she should have to register as a sex offender, as should anyone who falsely accuses someone of rape. And this is, of course, a nice idea. It's an idea that ought to be implemented, but it has not been. False accusations of harassment all too often do not count as harassment, generally. They are par for the course as long as they're committed by protected groups, such as women, against unprotected groups, such as men. Same goes for false accusations of rape, which are also almost always committed by women against men. With very few exceptions, women can commit these crimes, and they're not even crimes, effectively. Largely because the vast majority of men don't have the time or resources to file a $10 million lawsuit. It's very difficult to conduct a lawsuit of any kind when you've already been arrested on nothing but an accusation and your reputation's already been irreversibly tattered. The rule of innocent until proven guilty is not nearly as robust as anyone thinks it is, even in the land of the free, when it comes to women lying about men. I mean, especially not in the so-called land of the free, arguably. So I hope Matt takes her to the cleaners, assuming she's liable, of course. If not, I hope she takes him to the cleaners if it turns out he's the one falsely accusing someone of falsely accusing someone, and at that point I start to get confused. But the point is, we are in dire need of a breakthrough case when it comes to lying cunts getting what they deserve. To reiterate, I'm not saying she's a lying cunt, maybe Matt Taibbi is, but it wouldn't be the first time a woman destroyed a man through lawfare, justifiably or otherwise. It would be among the first high-profile cases of a man doing it to a woman, hopefully in this case, justifiably. But we'll see. Or maybe we won't see. Maybe it'll all get settled out of court and we'll be none the wiser. That's usually what happens. So, yeah, probably a nothing burger. Well, we'll get the nothing lettuce from a something burger, and we'll have to begrudgingly chew on that for all it's worth. Another day, another dollar.
This is one of those things that, I've been saying men need to do this. Every time that a woman makes a false allegation against a man and tries to use that as the way she takes down something that he's doing, whether it's a woman making a false allegation to get a guy's position at work, or a woman makes a false allegation to win a political campaign against a guy, or a woman makes a false allegation to silence a guy that's criticizing things that she stands for, which is what's going on in this case, then the guy needs to sue for defamation, especially as if it's a false allegation of sexual misconduct. But even if it's just a false allegation of harassment or misogyny or any other kind of misconduct that can ruin a guy's reputation because it's a woman accusing him. And when it comes to allegations of criminal misconduct, this one was just made on social media, so his best recourse is a lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
But we need to be pushing for something else too, because a lot of women, will, in conflict with a man, file false restraining orders, emergency temporary restraining orders. They will retain the services of domestic battery shelters and so on, and they'll falsely accuse men of domestic violence. They'll falsely accuse men of sexual violence, and they'll try to take down their side of the conflict with these false allegations. And the minute a woman goes to the police and registers a complaint, and that complaint is a false allegation, right? That needs to be nipped in the bud with legal action, and not just lawsuits, right? Those are actually process crimes. And one of the things that we as a movement should be pushing for is that those process crimes be taken much more seriously when the false allegation is something that can lead to arrest, an interrogation, long-term trial, of great complexity quite frequently. And not just public reputational damage, but potential incarceration, sometimes for years. There are men who have been in jail for upwards of 5 years, and there are some men who have been in jail under false allegations, under wrongful conviction, for long enough that if they had been doing a job, they could retire from it. Right? So their whole working life is taken away by these allegations. That's the same as if you used the false allegation to break into somebody's house, kidnap them, torture them, and then hold them imprisoned for years. So it's equivalent to the crimes of kidnapping, torture, and false imprisonment. And if women are going to do this, and they're going to do it so lightly that they really just consider it their first line of defense in a conflict with a man, we really need to push for the law to change so that if the allegation itself turns out to be false, then the punishment for the process crimes should be equivalent to what those crimes would be if she had directly acted upon the man herself instead of using the police and the court system to do it. And if that means that a woman might go to jail for 20 years or 30 years because she made a false allegation, then maybe that will act as a deterrent.
Yeah, it is. I hope that this goes to court. I hope it does set a precedent. I think that one thing that people often underestimate is the power of these accusations and how frequently they get used. And people they tend to be a little bit dismissive, like, well, he's probably going to beat it. But like that's not really the point, right? Like beat the allegations, not necessarily get like a settlement or win some kind of case or set some kind of legal precedent. Because that's the thing, like she can make these allegations on social media, destroy his reputation. It doesn't matter if like some people, like if the evidence proves otherwise, because what happens is most people on social media, they just come to their own conclusions. They don't really they don't follow it very closely. They don't concern themselves. They just decide whether or not they believe it, and they tend to side with the woman who makes the allegations. And their
how
reasoning.
Many people call Trump a convicted rapist.
Oh, they still do it. Like that's what I'm saying. Yeah. It never ended, and it's like the thing to do. Like if there is a man that you want to destroy, it doesn't matter if it becomes a criminal, goes to criminal court. It doesn't matter if it results in a cash settlement. The person's life is over. Like even people who beat their cases, like Johnny Depp beat Amber Heard legally in every respect, but because he didn't win against the Sun, and because there are people who simply, because they buy into the feminist lie that, women almost never see justice and that men are always getting away with it. So it's irrelevant whether or not he wins the case. So women know that they just have it in their pocket. Like that. I'm not saying they'll all use it, but they know they can. And there's not really going to be any consequences to lying. So even like, Mike said she might not be lying, but like, I think that she has way more to gain by lying than Matt Taibbi does. Like men don't get that. They don't have that in their back pocket. They don't get to say she is falsely accusing me and now I get to ruin her life. That's have you ever heard of that? No, it doesn't happen. In fact, now it's just now coming out. So like I think it was like a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, either 2023 or 2024, that Russell Brand got like accused by like 3 or 4 women of shit. And we covered it on this show. And now it recently came out that the UK Crown's Prosecution Service is charging him with 5 counts. But these are like the same. It's like it's catching up to the mainstream. And a lot of people now are like looking at it and they're trying to decide what, how feasible it is, even though it's been since 1999 and 2005 since this happened. But it doesn't matter. Like I said, what matters now is in most of these cases, like Trump, like Matt Taibbi, like Russell Brand, like even people that you may not like Bill Cosby, like Harvey Weinstein, like the judge whose name fails me right now, who's on the Supreme Court, like that they accused him, right? And a lot of these allegations
Judge
are complete.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah, Kavanaugh. And these allegations are completely ludicrous, and none of them are going to go anywhere except ruining the guy's reputation. And I think that one thing that about men that I think a lot of people don't understand is that a man's name is more than just like his job or whether or not he broke a law. And I think that a lot of people know that. And so when you destroy a man's name, it doesn't matter if they go to jail. It doesn't matter if they lose money. Like they've been tarnished and they can't possibly completely ever escape the allegation. Like you don't ever really escape it. And so Matt Taibbi, I hope, and I know that they came after him because of the work that he's done. I would be okay with staking my reputation on the fact that they did this to him to destroy his reputation and not because he actually did anything wrong. And I know that this is something they can always do unless more people come forward and say, no, you're lying. You're full of shit. I want you to prove it. Otherwise, I stand with this guy. That's what we have to do, because when people cower away from it because they're like, well, I don't want to be associated with someone that's accused of something without knowing whether or not they've actually been accused of anything, that only serves these people to do it more often, more frequently, and more intensely because, sometimes it's going to stick. And when it doesn't stick, there's no consequences. So you have nothing to lose by making these allegations. Nothing. So you can just do it. And yeah, so like I saw Russell Brand. Now people are coming out and are going, oh yeah, there's allegations, we think this is political. Yeah, we said this 2 years ago. Like, we here at Honey Badger Radio, like it or not, we're usually ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff, and now people are catching up. They're and so like they have to be ahead of the curve on this too. Don't when you learn about these allegations, you can look into it if you like to, but be prepared to find that this person is lying, and they can do it because they're a woman. They have the ability to make these allegations without people questioning their validity or questioning their integrity. And even if it is turns out that she is full of shit, there are no consequences. So there has to start to be consequences. Like, like that's the only way this is going to stop. And that begins with people presuming innocence on the part of men who are accused. Just presuming it. That's what I do. This is the reason, by the way, Paul Elam used to say, what did he used to say? He used to say that he would even if all the evidence pointed to a man being guilty of like a sexual crime, he would side with him just because of the preponderance of bullshit that stacks up against men before they even go to court. And
yeah, it's called jury nullification.
yeah,
And it's because it's something that you can do because you know that the system is stacked against the one side. For instance, in sexual misconduct crime cases,
yeah,
there's a certain because feminists have fought tooth and nail to exempt women from accountability for lying and things like that. They have worked very hard to exclude certain types of exculpatory evidence, from court cases. And it's stuff like they would be able to argue in court, that whatever it is that they want the judge to exclude isn't relevant, and a jury, it could agree with them if they were right. But what they've got put into law is that it's excluded every time it's that type of evidence, and not just when it isn't really relevant to the case. So, like, yes, it's true that sleeping around with 15 guys doesn't mean that a woman consented to sex with a particular guy. But at the same time, if there's a specific set of behaviors that she engages in during sex, and some of them are rough, her claim that one of those behaviors indicates that she was fighting back and that this particular incident was rape, um, isn't as credible as if she's like virginal and doesn't do those things all the time. And that was, I can't think of the guy's name, but that was the case where a woman argued that she'd bitten her attacker, and that made it proof that she was fighting back against a rape. But all of her exes could have testified that she bit during sex all the time. It was what she did when she was feeling passionate, and it didn't necessarily indicate any kind of fighting or defense. And this guy got convicted based on this testimony, and he was not allowed to have the testimony included in the case that actually it's not an indicator of that because she does it all the time. Because feminists have gotten it put into law that a woman's sexual history cannot be entered in as evidence unless a judge approves it. So the
yeah,
judge can gatekeep that kind of evidence, right? And that alone, just knowing that exculpatory evidence could have been withheld from the case, is reason enough to engage in jury nullification in rape cases.
yeah. Okay, so I got a super chow that I got to read out from the last story. Sorry about that. And I got a super chow yesterday that I guess I'll read just because it's going to get lost if I don't. All right, so a couple things. So I got some super chows. So I'm going to read those and then we'll move on to the next story. But yeah, like I was saying that, I'm glad that Matt Taibbi is making a fuss out of this, because more men need to do that. And they shouldn't take this shit lying down, because if you know someone's just trying to destroy your reputation, or even twist something that did, because sometimes these things, they have like a kernel of truth, and those are like the worst things to to deal with, because it's like it gets into a gray area, like, did this happen? And of course, feminists have already altered the language and altered the meanings of words enough that it becomes very difficult for men to protect themselves, which is why I just say, guys, maybe you shouldn't be fucking around with these women. Like, maybe you just shouldn't. Like, checking out is probably the safest thing to do, to be honest. And if they end up alone and trying to figure out where all the good men are at, then that's on them. That's I mean, because it's just not worth it. But anyway,
it's gotten so bad that you could have proof of consent.
Yeah, and it wouldn't matter.
To exclude
No,
it from the
you
case.
could like have
In
never
fact,
met the person, and they could say some shit. So,
well, it's not just that. I can't think of the guy's name in Canada either. The case where he had a bunch of women accuse him of sexual misconduct, where they said they hadn't consented, and then it turns out he had physical evidence, like messages they'd written and stuff like that to him, that proved that actually, yes, they had consented. And then there were also messages back and forth between them proving that they orchestrated this campaign of false allegations against him as an attack on him for completely different reasons that had nothing to do with how they felt about their sex acts with him and everything.
John Gomeshi. I mean, John
Yeah,
Gomeshi.
Gomeshi.
Yeah, Gomeshi.
And what did Canada do in response to that case? Do you know what the feminists did in Canada in response to that case? They tried to outlaw the submission of communications around a sex act. That this evidence that proved that these women were lying, feminists argue that you shouldn't.
They could argue that it's revenge porn. They could they could try to do that.
But that wasn't what they were going for. But they kind of did argue that. But it wasn't the main argument they were making on it. But they tried to get it excluded, that if you have any communications around a sex act or anything like that that demonstrates consent and demonstrates that after the sex act, like immediately after the sex act, that the woman was happy with what had happened and was saying, "Oh, I can't wait to do this again," and things like that, that those can't be admitted because they might prove the guy innocent. And if she said she was raped, that she was raped, and therefore anything that might constitute proof of innocence is an attack on a rape victim. That was their logic.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, I got some super chats. Let me read them really quick because they're kind of backing up. So somebody gave us a few days ago, Rantsucker 237 Manifestella Influencers gave us $5 and said, "We was pharaohs and philosophers and shit." Thank you, Rantsucker 237 Manifestella on Influencers, for that $5. And then Anonymous gave us $10 and then $10. So I think part of this went to the fundraiser. So thank you to that person.
Thank you. Come again.
And said, "Can Brian or Allison watch and comment on the video Young Men Are Beginning to Revolt by Nick Freitas? They discuss men becoming monsters as a result of feminism and feminine-led society, that women are responsible to fix what is happening to young men, and how we should present men with women who are worthy of their time and sacrifice. Present men with women." I was surprised to hear people outside of the MRA and anti-feminism community talking about this so casually, and not just the Badgers, Tom Golden, Janice Fiamengo, and Rachel Wilson. The video gets good at 38 minutes when the woman mentions male criminals are maybe a result of abusive mothers. Someone with a large following actually telling women that their actions have an impact. Yes, I heard about that. I haven't watched the video yet. But I understand that Matt Freitas, or Nick Freitas is his name, he has started to come around a little bit on this stuff. Like, in the past, he was the kind of like, yeah, just man up kind of guy. But he's starting to see that he says, "Oh, the landscape has changed from when I was a kid." But I think that you just didn't pay attention. You just kind of put up with it when you were younger. That's what I think. But
I think a lot of people weren't impacted by it when they were younger, and so they didn't see it. And the
yeah.
longer you live, the more likely a thing that happens to a lot of people is that you're going to be included in the a lot of people group, and not the group of people that it hasn't happened to yet. Just like, well, some people have never experienced the flu until the first time they get it, and then they know what it's like to have the flu. And
Yeah.
this is just about as common as the flu. And it is a social contagion. Once women start learning that they can behave this way and get away with mistreating men using false allegations, taking advantage of men for their money, living as single moms at the expense of the baby daddy and all of the men paying taxes to the government.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't raise their kids right, and they don't take the blame for it when their kids have problems in adulthood and cause problems for other people in adulthood. Like, as long as women feel like they can get away with that, it increases among women. They'll reinforce it to each other. Girl, you shouldn't take that from a guy. He can't tell you that. He can't criticize you for that. How dare he? What's wrong with him? That's misogynistic, right? And so, of course, now we've got normies talking about it. They're starting to notice because the contagion has spread far enough that it has reached their women, and they are experiencing the consequences.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And then Meredith G gives us $5 and says HBR News 497. I'm a little late on the comment because I finally got home. So here's the problem with all these people defending the organized protest. Not only is a BS because it is organization of violence and property destruction, which is criminal. Yes, it's not a protest if you're destroying Teslas. Thank you. Even vandalism is property destruction. If you care about private property rights, then yeah, this is illegal. Like, that's it. It's just criminal. It is a means of trying to overturn the results of an election. We are already dealing with the judiciary exceeding its authority to subvert the will of the people. If you didn't vote for Trump and don't like the consequence, tough shit. Elections have consequences, but don't use my taxpayer dollars to subvert my vote and the votes of millions of other Americans. Rant over. Keep in mind, all of the protesters are captured by the system and view those dollars that are being cut as theirs. Yeah, like commies usually do. Dollars or the person who actually earned them and paid the taxes. All right, thank you, Meredith. And
I
you guys
want to point something out too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, just because something like a riot gets deemed a protest doesn't make it not a riot. Right? People don't riot out of the blue for no reason. Like, they're just standing around one day and they're like, I'm going to go rob a bunch of stores downtown. And the whole community does it all at once, without some predicating factor and without some goal in mind, or at least some objection in mind. Right? Some protests become riots. They're still protests. It's not the either or. There is a huge overlap. Every riot is a protest that got out of hand in one way or another, whether that was deliberate and orchestrated or not. Right?
Yeah.
Being a protest doesn't necessarily make it not a riot either.
Yep. All right. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, it gets framed all of one thing or all of another thing, and the truth is that, it becomes a riot when people riot.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that everyone engaged in violence or destruction are rioters, because a lot of times the protests are used by rioters as cover for them to do what they're doing. So,
and it's important that people respond to this, in an effective manner. And it is effective when someone says, "Oh, that wasn't a riot; it was a protest." You can say being a protest does not preclude being a riot. If there's violence involved, if you're setting things on fire, that's a riot, even if it was a protest.
Yeah,
you rioted in protest, but it's still a riot. It's not protected speech.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. So, speaking of all the stuff dealing with Musk, the European Union is considering the possibility of fining Elon Musk's ex $1 billion The EU cites their new Digital Services Act and accuses Musk's platform. I could see like Dr. Evil at the head. He's like the chairman of the
I put that
European
in the
Union.
least,
Yeah.
just because I wanted to hear you
We
say
have them
that.
in Belgium. In Belgium, it's called a Belgium dip. Okay, anyway, the EU cites their new Digital Services Act and accuses Musk's platform of having violated the act, quote, in areas linked to dark patterns, advertising transparency, and data access for researchers, end quote. Further alleging that the blue checkmark system, quote, negatively affects users' ability to make free and informed decisions about the authenticity of the account. Wait, the blue checks are bad now? About the authenticity of the accounts and the content they interact with, end quote. CEO of X, Linda Yaccarino, stated on X that such an action, quote, would be an egregious example of regulatory overreach, end quote.
Lol. First time, bro. You think this is egregious? The EU eats this shit for breakfast. Yes, the EU does indeed eat shit on a gluten-free croissant. For you, the day the EU graced your village was the most egregious regulatory overreach of your life. For the EU, it was Tuesday. Well, X is an American company. Maybe y'all should just leave the European Union. Oh, wait. You guys were 200 years ahead of the curve on that one. Well spotted. It's handy to be able to project economic models more than 2 seconds into the future. I'm sure the price of tea did indeed go up on that fateful Thursday in Boston, but it worked out pretty sweetly, eventually. Well, that was until income tax was introduced, and it created 100 years of darkness that made a 2-cent tax on tea or whatever it was seem rather trifling in comparison. Imagine, if you will, a president who is prepared to take the perhaps drastic measures necessary to end that century of darkness. And what I mean by darkness, by the way, is stealing people's wages, punishing people for working hard, disincentivizing people from being productive members of society. That's certainly not going to do any favors for anyone, except, of course, the organized crime syndicate doing all the stealing. That is guaranteed to cast a pall of despair over a populace as the poor get poorer and the rich get poorer and everyone in between gets poorer. And the government spends everyone's money on wars and bureaucracy and a whole bunch of gay bullshit that no one needs. That's what I mean by darkness. The EU, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be making any effort to clarify what it means by, quote, areas linked to dark patterns, end quote. They're just leaving it hanging there like we're supposed to understand. Look, I don't like how Twitter defaults to dark mode either. Dark mode fucks up my eyes, but it's very easy to change it to light mode. It's right there in the settings tab. Is that what they mean by dark? I presume they're not being racist. The EU would never do that. Not in that direction, anyway. If anyone else on Twitter spoke ill of areas linked to dark patterns, they would probably be arrested for hate speech in the EU for, dangerous insinuations about the Great Replacement. But the EU can go ahead and say it and refuse to elaborate and then leave, and it's fine. I suspect it might just be empty emotional rhetoric, folks. What do you think? They might as well be saying areas linked to evil skullduggery, to villainous nefariousness, and so on.
Emotional damage.
Yeah, people are voicing unwanted facts. They're blaspheming against our precious global gay race communism. Won't somebody think of the trans children? So let's see if we can translate some of these other passages that they've cited as worthy of a $1 billion heist. Advertising transparency. Look, I'm annoyed by ads as much as anyone else, but they're fairly easy to spot because they say ad at the top right. And if you're that bothered, you can just block them or mute them. Yes, a lot of videos on Twitter have had a certain watermark at the bottom right, advertising a certain gambling site, but the community notes have done their best to point this out. If we're talking transparency, no other site has community notes or anything resembling them. How many dollars are you going to steal from Google, given that they curate their search results in favor of essentially advertising global gay race communism, and they neglect to inform anyone that they're doing this? No, that's fine. Nothing to see here. That's weird. That is weird. What else do we have?
Hey,
Data
remember
access.
remember the EU tried to ban Pepe the Frog?
Oh God.
They've banned everything. They've banned everything but themselves.
Article 13, EU Article 13 banned Pepe the Frog. I'm not kidding. But go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Remember the Kekistani revolt.
Data access for researchers. They've been accused of not allowing. Yeah, imagine that. Imagine Twitter having the audacity to not hand over its database to the EU, who will then sell it on to the highest bidder, namely China. I mean, the nerve. Now, if we want to steal 1 billion people's private data, we have to perform a gigantic international DDoS attack and steal it during the blackout. It's just so inconvenient. We shouldn't have to do that. You should just give us what we want. That does it. We're going to steal your data and your money. We're definitely the good guys, by the way. We're definitely not the forces of darkness in this equation. How very dare you. Alrighty. Yeah, the blue checkmark system negatively affects users' ability to make free and informed decisions about the authenticity of the accounts and the content they interact with. No, it does not. The blue checkmark indicates that someone is paying for a premium account, and that's all. The gold checkmark indicates the account is a verified organization, and that means they're very probably biased, and you should approach them with caution. The gray checkmark indicates the account is a government official, and that means they're definitely biased, and you should assume by default that everything they're saying is a lie. It's a very simple system and a very effective one, and it's outlined concisely in Twitter's help center. If you're a moron and you're unable to figure this shit out, that is entirely your problem, and you probably shouldn't be in charge of a fucking continent. But that's just my opinion.
Feels bad, man.
You know, what's interesting about this is how people are kind of looking at it. Because I've seen some discussion on this, where people are like, well, this is just their rules. If he wants to do business in their country, he's got to obey their rules. This is a man standing up for what he thinks is right, whether you agree with what he thinks is right or not. He's taking a huge risk with everything that he's doing. He's taking a huge financial risk. He's taking, he probably can't go to Europe now, because they would arrest him for something. They would find some sort of charge to make up. And I mean, they don't
need a reason. They could just,
right.
Because
they just
you weren't masked up sufficiently.
The reason that they want to do it is obvious. And he's going through the budget of the United States government and finding areas of corruption where money laundering has been taking place and ending those. His organization has been putting the kibosh to quite a bit of stealing that has been taking place. And every nation in the world has been involved in that theft, and including America stealing from America. So, and we've essentially been the harvest that everybody's taking from for so long. So no wonder they hate him, right? And this is a man who's stepped up and decided to pay the consequences that's needed in order to keep this going and keep the reform happening. Right? Like, you've seen the meme of the knight or the hero standing over a kid, and the kid's sleeping peacefully, and the hero has a bunch of knives in his back. Like, that's what we're looking at right now. And it's always a man. You don't see women very often wearing that cape and getting those knives in their back. When they do, they back down. They don't take it. And he hasn't backed down. And I think the EU is missing something here too. 'Cause when Ukraine needed,
'Cause when Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there.
Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. Ukraine needed, you know, Russia was there. internet connections available, needed service in order to be able to maintain their communications. He put up satellites and gave them communications capability. And if the EU decides, we're going to fine him $1 billion, and he decides he's not going to pay it, if he's going to spend that kind of money in order to be able to continue to do business there, like he can just put up satellites, and
Yeah.
if people can't access it through their regular internet service, they can access it that way. Right? He could get around anything that they try to do to him. It just depends on how much money he wants to spend, and how much investment he wants to make, and how much return he can get on his investment. So they're kind of, even though it seems like they're a big dog going after a mouse, they're actually a mouse yapping at a big dog. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Maybe he'll pay the fine and say, all right, I pay the fine and keep doing business. Right? Maybe he'll make some changes to how Twitter works, how X works in Europe, so that if you're using it in Europe, Europe is allowed to harvest your data. All right, maybe he'll do some different things like that. But there isn't really anything they can make him do.
No.
And so I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward.
That's why they're
to
considering
seeing,
it.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Because it is kind of fun to watch a guy deal with this kind of stuff, and a guy who is like, I wouldn't say that Musk is fearless. I don't think anybody is fearless, but he's definitely very targeted in his actions. And he makes his decisions like very pointedly, and it's always fun to watch those kind of guys respond to changes, like this in their business environment. So it's one of the things that actually made Trump fun to watch doing business when he was younger. So that's part of why I wanted to see this talked about, is just the fact that, like I said, this is something that men deal with. This isn't really something that women deal with. The behavior the EU is engaging in is very feminine. So it'll be quite interesting to see how the masculine handles more feminine bullshit.
Yep. Well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. What could happen is maybe he'll pay them the $1 billion and then they'll give it back to us because they got to pay the tariffs. So it won't even matter.
Right,
it's a wash. Here's a wash. Yeah. Okay. Here's $1 billion. Now give us 200 billion. All right. So anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I did get a Rumble rant from NovaFan. Thank you, NovaFan. I really got to put Rumble Chan back on the streams when I figure out a better way to do it, implement it. But he gives us $1 and says, I saw a few content creators call out Megyn Kelly for being a feminist infiltrator, whining about girls being told they can't find a man if she has a job. In other news, water is wet. Thank you for that. I would not call Megyn Kelly an infiltrator because it suggests that she is covert. I think that the truth is, I know a lot of people call supposed right-wing, women covert feminists, but what people have to understand, and I've been saying this for, I don't know, I feel like I've been saying this for absolutely the entire time that I've been doing this almost. Most of us are feminists. Supposedly conservative women are just feminists doing the speed limit. That means they're not conservative. If you put an R next to your name, it doesn't change your fundamental core belief system or your principles. It comes down to, how do you act in the world? This is what when I say people, I don't care what you call yourself. Show me who you are by what you do and what you believe. And that's how I know. So Megyn Kelly is not infiltrating. She just is. She's just Megyn Kelly. She's a girl boss, second wave feminist like most of these supposed right-wing commentators are. That's just, and I'm not even mad, because it's not like I see it as a deception. That's what infiltration infers. She's not deceptive. She just is. She's just not like, she's not a crazy progressive, pro-trans intersectional feminist, but that doesn't mean she's not a feminist. Like most people, regardless of what they tell you they believe, are feminists, like most of us, because that they are, because when they say, well, here are the things I disagree with when it comes to feminism, they're saying that there is stuff that they do agree with. That's how like they're not rejecting it wholesale. And why would they? Most of us don't know another way to see this. They have no other way to look at this dynamic. And that goes for men and women, right? So
people have to understand.
But here's the thing. It is starting to come to a head. It's starting to, with some people who are realizing that this scenario, this feminist framework that everybody operates under, everybody all over the world, it will eventually have to come to a head at some point. Either the birth rates are going to fall enough that people in like the, Korea or Japan or parts of like other parts of Asia are like, we got to do something about this, or it's going to come out in other ways. But it's going to happen eventually, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, Megyn Kelly's a feminist. News at 11. Water is wet. She's basically no different from the average modern woman. And men too. They're all on board. Like, to shake them out of it, it's a monumental task. It's just not going to happen overnight. People are way too embedded in this right now, and that's the reason why. But it's going to come to a head because not enough suffering has happened for people to realize that this is an unsustainable project that has done nothing but crazy amounts of damage to every level of our society, and not enough people are speaking out. But I think that one way or another, it's going to have to be confronted. So,
all right. What people have to understand is women can do harm without being feminist. Women can be wrong without being feminist, right? Women can be entitled without being feminist. And just because a woman's wrongful sense of entitlement does harm, doesn't make it feminist. And just because a woman's wrongful sense of entitlement that does harm is not feminist, doesn't make it okay. So even if she doesn't think that women have been oppressed throughout history by all of male civilization, the entire male population, and she doesn't think that there's a fight for equality between men and women that needs to happen, and she doesn't think that abuse is only abuse when a man does it and not when a woman does it, and all that kind of thing. Even if she doesn't think those things, if she does think that men owe women provision and protection and a sense of divinity, basically, women should be revered because they're female, that women deserve to be treated like ladies whether they act that way or not. Even if she's not feminist, even if she doesn't have that victim narrative that feminists have, just those things are still wrong and should still be called out. And we don't have to use the word feminist wrongly or falsely in order to call those things out. It's shitty behavior, right? And right-wing women, there's a lot of shitty behavior that still needs to be called out. The assumption that you're going to be a housewife and he's going to work 2 jobs, and if you don't like the fact that he didn't vacuum the living room floor, you get to nag him about it, but he's not allowed to say anything to you about wearing a shirt that shows half your tits. That's got to be called out, right? If they're gonna use equality, if they're going to use legal equality, if they're going to use equal pay, if they're going to use the fact that the court systems will side with them if they get a divorce, then they need to be called out on it even if they don't identify as feminists, and even if they don't identify with the most well-known feminist narratives.
Yes, but Megyn Kelly does believe those things. That, like I
Yeah.
said, feminism is the default setting. Period. Like very, very, very few people do not
taught in
believe.
schools.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's the
It's
norm.
not default.
So even if
it's trained.
it's like I said, it is, but it is what is trained into the average person. Like it's ubiquitous. It is the ubiquitous belief system, even if it isn't true. So
Right.
yeah, sure, women can be shitty, but Megyn
But
Kelly
even if people argue, oh, she's not feminist, she's right wing, that doesn't make her not wrong.
Right, but she is feminist, though. That's the important thing. She does agree with those. No, it does. In this case,
the important thing. The important thing is that we have to be able to call women out regardless of
absolutely. But yes, of sure. I don't disagree with that. But I'm just saying, in this case, Megyn Kelly and other conservative influencers, or supposedly,
I do agree that a lot of women believe it. I do agree. That,
I'm not saying that's not the end all be all of wrongness, but I'm saying when people say it's a right wing feminist, and it's like, yeah, there are feminists that claim to be right wing.
There are lots of right wing feminists. There's a whole right wing feminist organized voter group. They're called Concerned Women for America. It's a pro life group and everything. But they are feminist. They still have that narrative of women were oppressed. And that makes the difference. If they believe that women were oppressed and they believe in patriarchy theory, they're feminists.
Yes.
If they don't believe in that bullshit, they're not feminist. But if they're still promoting ideas that enslave men, they're still wrong. They're still gynocentric. And that's a larger group and a bigger target. And it's important to not lose sight of that, because there's been multiple times where I've been arguing with somebody about a particular issue or a particular lifestyle. And the argument isn't necessarily, I think this other person shouldn't be able to have that lifestyle consensually with another person. It's, I'm saying this lifestyle isn't something that should be imposed on men. And she's saying this lifestyle is something women have a right to, and a man is not a real man if he doesn't give it to her. And I get back, why are you arguing with this woman? She's not a feminist, she's right wing. And the two things that are wrong with that statement is that, one, being right wing doesn't preclude feminism. And two, not being a feminist doesn't preclude being harmfully wrong.
Right.
I mean, people sometimes use feminism as a descriptor, and some people, they use it as an identity, and that's where the wires get crossed. This is why we have the word gynocentric. It covers all these things. Megyn Kelly is clearly a gynocentrist. All feminists are clearly gynocentric. That's just an easy way of
feminism is basically economic exploitation of gynocentrism.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I got one more story, but it's like two stories because they're very similar. So I'm going to read through both of them. And this is just women being women. So I have this is like the Women Are Wonderful segment that I sometimes do, where we just hear about all of the ways that women can do everything that we claim men can do.
Times are changing. The ladies can do stuff now.
So, all right. So here we go. Number one, and these are two stories, but notice they're very similar. In Columbus, Ohio, Stephanie Demetrius, pictured here, a 44-year-old literacy enrichment instructor at the Academy for Urban Scholars High School, was arrested and charged with felony conspiracy for allegedly attempting to hire a student to kill her estranged husband. The plot unraveled when the student's mother discovered incriminating text messages on her son's phone and alerted authorities. Court documents reveal that on March 26, 2025, Demetrius offered the student $2,000, providing an initial $250 cash down payment, and discussed logistics such as her husband's work from home schedule and dismissing concerns about neighbors hearing gunfire. The Columbus Division of Police emphasized the grooming aspect, so she groomed a student to kill her husband. With Sergeant James Fuqua noting the teacher's intent to manipulate the young person into committing murder. Demetrius was apprehended on April 2nd at her Powell home as captured in police body camera footage and arraigned in Franklin County Municipal Court with a $150,000 bond set. Her public defender denied the allegations, calling them fabricated, while prosecutors highlighted her history of possessive behavior, including prior violations of a protective order issued by her husband amid their ongoing divorce. The Academy for Urban Scholars swiftly terminated her employment, underscoring their priority on student safety. The case, which has drawn attention for its disturbing abuse of authority, awaits a preliminary hearing on April 11th, leaving the community grappling with the implications of such a betrayal by an educator. And then we have this other story, story number 2. Bardin, pictured here. This is a teacher, Elena Bardin. I don't know. Let's see. Bardin, a 27-year-old teacher at a juvenile detention center. I think I have. I'm sorry. I got to find the correct write-up. I think I have the wrong thing here. Give me a second. I am sorry. Demetrius. Oh yeah, Kentucky. A 27-year-old teacher named Elena Bardin, employed by Adair County Schools at a juvenile detention center, faces serious charges following a disturbing discovery on March 27, 2025. During a routine search at the Adair County Juvenile Detention Center, Kentucky State Police uncovered letters and sexually explicit materials in a boy's bunk, allegedly sent by Bardin. Investigators claim she subjected the juvenile inmate to illegal sexual contact. That's what they're calling it, illegal sexual contact. I feel like there's another word for that. And provided him with explicit images of herself exploiting her position of authority. The situation escalated further when evidence revealed Bardin had asked the boy to kill her husband, intertwining sexual misconduct with a solicitation of murder. Bardin was arrested on April 3rd, 2025, and charged with first-degree sexual abuse, use of a minor in a sexual performance, and tampering with physical evidence, with additional charges pending as the investigation continues. The Kentucky State Police acted swiftly after the detention center's findings, highlighting the gravity of the allegations against the trusted educator. The Adair County School District issued a statement distancing itself from Bardin's actions, emphasizing that her alleged behavior occurred outside school premises and reinforcing their commitment to student safety. This case has shocked the local community, raising questions about oversight in juvenile facilities and the vetting of staff in such sensitive roles.
Who else came into this thinking it was going to be just another nonce story? Yeah. We've done so many of these now. I got half a sentence into the write-up and I went, all right, chalk it up, reset the clock, fire up the wood chipper. Dang, this wood chipper's getting knackered now. Old Betsy needs a sharpening. It's like trying to push a nonce through a paper shredder at this point. Bit of a strain on my shoulder is all, not to mention the wear and tear on the old shoving stick. So imagine my surprise to discover that it's kind of even worse than noncery. You might wonder if anything could be worse than that. But yes, actually, I think this is considerably worse. There are many among us who can only laugh and rejoice at the lasting trauma that a young man goes through when he gets raped by a woman, especially a teacher. But even those sociopaths would have to think twice about the notion of using an adolescent boy as a murder weapon. Using him as a dildo, fine. Nice, even. I wish my teacher used me as a dildo. Where were these teachers when I was going to get all that? But a murder weapon, yeah, no. Even I, the sociopath I am, finding myself feeling this eerie sense that adolescent males might actually be humans? Like vulnerable, impressionable, maybe even innocent humans? It's such a strange feeling. And maybe that's because the thought had never occurred to you that women do this all the time. It's usually not underage boys, and it's usually not murder. But yes, women commit violent crimes all the time and get away with it because their weapon of choice is a man, usually against another man. And unlike when they use a dog as a weapon, you don't get all manner of boss-eyed boneheads going, it's the owner's fault, it's the owner's fault, it's just bad training. Dogs don't even have genetics, la la la, I'm not listening. No, when the weapon is a man, it's the opposite. it's always the weapon's fault. When the weapon is a gun, it's kind of split right down the middle. Half the people say it's the gun owner's fault and we should lock them up. The other half say it's the gun's fault and we should lock up the guns. But when the weapon is a man, all other political persuasions disappear. The liberals and the conservatives and the dog people and the cat people will all stand shoulder to shoulder, pat each other on the back, and blame everything on the weapon because the weapon is a man. Because he should know better, after all. And she... What do you mean she? There was no woman involved. What are you, a misogynist, man up? So, yeah, what you're seeing in this story is just the tip of the iceberg. The first nodule of ice that you've ever seen poking out of the water, blissfully unaware as you are about the 3-mile chunk of blue death under the surface, the long and storied history of women sending men and boys to kill and be killed. It happens here. It happens all the way over there in that backwards land of savages that you could have sworn was a real patriarchy. And it happened in the long, long ago when you could have sworn it was a real patriarchy. Ask yourself why this is what it took for you to finally notice a teacher doing it to a student. A teacher can't do that to a student. Teachers can't just treat students like property as though they have the power of life and death over them. Well, guess what? Women can't just do that to men either, because women do not own men. Y'all are already struggling, aren't you? Well, here you go. Mothers don't own their sons either. Yeah, no, not as property. Property is something that you get to destroy if you want to, and you can use it to destroy something else if you need to. You do not get to do that to human beings of any age or sex. I mean, you do. That's the sad state of affairs we're living in. You can absolutely do that to a male human, and you will probably get away with it. But I don't approve. Is what I'm saying. I can't get behind that. And one day I hope to live in a society where you don't get to do that. But I'm not holding my breath. If it ever does happen, it very probably won't happen in my lifetime or the next. And so I keep my head down and I plant trees in whose shade I will never sit. My gravestone will tell everyone that I was a crazy person, and maybe that's true. But at least I never killed or died for a woman. I had 99 problems, for sure. You can fill in the rest. Rip me. I was here. And no, I wasn't. Whatever.
Yeah, there's a few elements of this that I want people to notice. All right. I want you to remember what Donald Trump was sued for that has led to people wrongly calling him a convicted rapist, right? Because he was never convicted of rape. But a judge did award one of his false accusers a large sum of money on the idea that it was defamation against her for him to deny that he committed a crime that he has not been found guilty of committing. And that's it. That's all he did, was say, I did not do what she said, and she's making it up, and she's crazy. Like those were his takes on the subject. These women said that about these boys, that they groomed and raped and were grooming into committing murder. They specifically targeted boys because it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get a girl to murder somebody for you, especially if you're a female. So they specifically targeted boys. And you have to think about, people talk about these stories in terms of the nefariousness of the sexual violence and the nefariousness of the gaslighting and the grooming and so on. What happens if the state doesn't catch the grooming happening before the murder is committed? What happens if the kid actually pulls the trigger? Does he get treated as a crime victim then? Because there have been some cases in the past where suddenly it was an adult woman and an underage boy conspiring to kill her husband, and the boy pulled the trigger, and of course he gets tried as an adult. So it's recognized that he's vulnerable and endangered by this process right up until it's successful. And then if he actually gets conned and he actually commits the crime, and he has to remember for the rest of his life that he shot somebody and that person died right in front of him, suddenly he's an adult who's accountable for equal participation, and he's the mastermind who pulled the trigger, and he goes to jail. And there's this disconnect with people. Well, but the crime was heinous, right? He must be accountable as an adult because what he did was so bad. Nothing about that indicates that he understood that at the time that it happened, right? Nothing about that indicates that he had adult comprehension and an adult capacity to appraise his actions and their potential consequences. It's that we're as mad at him as we would be at an adult, and therefore we want to treat him like an adult. And that's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, what happened here is wrong. The reporting on it is wrong. They're not taking seriously the sex crimes that were committed. The insidiousness is much bigger than is being reported. And the fact that nobody in media has spoken up and said, we recognize these boys as victims, when the process of brainwashing them into committing a heinous crime is stopped before its completion. We should be able to recognize them as victims if it's not stopped before its completion.
Mm-hmm.
Think
All
about
right.
what those boys' lives would have been like
Oh,
if
yeah.
these women had succeeded. And 2 men would have been dead. Just
Yep.
gone.
But those boys are probably going to be somewhat transformed by this, even though it didn't end up happening. You know, so like these women probably still left quite the mark on them regardless, especially the grooming. I thought one of these boys was like in a special education program, but
One of them was
I
in
couldn't.
juvie.
Yeah, one
Like,
of
he
them was
was a
in
prisoner.
juvenile, but
She
I thought
acted
the
on
other
someone.
one, yes,
Yeah, the
yes.
other one was in special education.
I
That's
think
right.
the
They
other one
didn't
was in
act on
special
normal
education.
guys.
Yes, these are not normal guys,
Yeah.
right?
They didn't act on. They acted on. One of them acted on a guy that was a captive, that could not run away from her. That if she didn't like the way he behaved, she could affect his life in profound ways, take away privileges, cause punishments to happen, badmouth him to the people that were in charge of the facility he was in, and so on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the other one, because he did have a learning disability, he was in a vulnerable position as well. Not just vulnerable because of his mentality, but when you're in a special program in school, you have less leeway of where you can go and what you can do. And if you are in a conflict or it looks like there's trouble, you're at risk of being deemed the cause of the trouble without an investigation because you must have done something wrong because you have an intellectual disability. Even when it's like severe dyslexia.
Yep. Anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one and these two stories in the comments. Did you see any parallel? Remember those, like, you ever had a highlights book and there's like the matching game where you have two pictures and they look very similar, but there's little differences. You have to find the differences. See if you guys can do that with these two stories. So anyway, we're going to go now into the patron show and we're going to look at the rest, or at least some more of this video. how Invincible deconstructs masculinity and try to address this person's comments on it. I had another video that I was going to show at the end, which was this funny little video about the ways that women lie to other women so that they could like compete. It was pretty funny, but for whatever reason, the file's too big for me to play in the browser, so I'll have to like show it off another way, but I can't do it now. So anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Maybe I'll play it in the patron show. So maybe you should come check it out there. But for now, we're gonna move on to that show itself. So I'm gonna let you guys go. I want to thank you guys for showing up to the show. I want to thank Mike and Hannah as always for providing their commentary, which is invaluable. And I want to thank you guys for watching, because like without you, we'd be screaming into the void. So with all that said, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will talk to you guys in the next one.